basics of working out how many children you have the potential to have using astrology. Hi Wildings, welcome back to the Wilding Astro Tarot YouTube channel for a really quick astrology reading today on reading children in the chart. I've had this question a few times on my TikTok channel, and to do it justice I decided to upload like a little explainer on YouTube just to like really quickly go through all the basics that you need to know in terms of reading your own individual chart, and then how to put two separate people's charts together to see how they blend and how you can split the difference to figure out what the most likely outcome would be in terms of children when two individual charts come together. Obviously I can't include every single little thing in this video, so if you do have additional questions that come up as you're working through this, leave them below and I'll do my best to answer as many of them as possible. But yeah, let's get into the video, figuring out how many children you're going to have using astrology. Here's the basics of working out how many children you have the potential to have using astrology. So the general rule of thumb is that the number of placements in the fifth house will give you a general number to start off with. This is because the fifth house is a house of children, and so if you have 0 placements in the fifth house, you start with a potential of 0, but it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on how many placements you have in this house. However, then you need to take into consideration the kinds of placements that you have in that house. If you have benefic and amplifying placements such as Jupiter, Venus, or the North Node in your fifth house, this can increase your potential of having children and increase the amount of children that you might have. For example, my father only has 1 placement in his fifth house, but it's the North Node, which is a heavy amplification energy, which is why he has 3 children. However, if you have minimizing or malefic placements in your fifth house, such as the South Node, Saturn, or Mars, this can either reduce the amount of children that you have, or it can mean that you have to go about having them a different way. It can often indicate either like having children via like surrogates, maybe having infertility issues that need to be overcome, or something like that. For example, Carrie Fletcher has 3 placements in her fifth house, indicating a starting potential of having 3 children. However, because she's queer and 2 of those are malefic, I would hazard a guess that she will not carry her children and that her partner will. The other interpretation for this is that having benefics and amplification energies in the fifth house means that you're more likely to reach the full potential of however many placements you have in that house, whereas having malefics and minimizing energies in the fifth house may mean that you might not reach whatever the starting potential is. The last thing you want to look at an individual chart before you start to try and add them together is to look at the potential sexes of those babies using the planets inside the fifth house. The Sun, Mars, and Saturn tend to lean more towards boys. The Moon, Venus, and Neptune usually lean more towards girls. Mercury, Jupiter, Uranus, and Pluto tend to be more neutral. However, Mercury slightly leans towards a boy and Uranus slightly leans towards a girl. For example, in my brother's chart, he has a starting potential of 4 children because he has 4 placements in the fifth house. Because 2 of those placements are benefics and 0 malefics, this indicates he's much more likely to reach that full potential of having 4 children, or he might even end up with a few more. There's only 1 placement in the house that's leaning really heavily one way or the other when it comes to boys or girls, and that's Venus, so he's definitely going to have at least 1 girl. But given that Uranus leans slightly feminine and Mercury leans slightly masculine, I'm going to guess it'll either have 2 boys and 2 girls, or 3 girls and 1 boy. The other interpretation of whether the planets inside the fifth house lean slightly more masculine or slightly more feminine is that it's not going to be about the sex of the baby per se, but it's going to be more about your role in that child's life. And my brother's a good example of this because he has a very mixed energy, like a very strong inner masculine, but also a very strong inner feminine. And because his fifth house placements are so split 50-50 between the two, this can indicate him providing a bit of that feminine role model as well as a bit of a masculine role model to his children as well. When we look back at Carrie Fletcher's chart, all of her placements lean masculine, so this can indicate having all boys and or being more of a more masculine paternal role model to those children. Whereas if you look at my chart, all of my fifth house placements all lean feminine. So again, this can indicate having either all girls and or being the more feminine maternal role model to your children. If you have an empty 5th house like my sister does, this means that you have a starting potential of 0 children. However, you would then look at the 4th and the 11th house. The 4th house is the house of family, so if there's benefic and amplifying energies in the 4th house, sometimes this can carry over into the next house of children. However, in my sister's case, she has a malefic Mars in her 4th house, so this is unlikely. In her case though, she has 2 placements in her 11th house. And this is the house of adoption because the 11th house rules universal love. It rules the kind of love that you have for adoptive kids that transcends you needing to be biologically related to them to love them just the same. Having 2 placements in the 11th house can indicate having the potential to adopt 2 children. This might mean that my sister might adopt 1 or 2 children. Neptune's a little bit malefic, so the potential might not be reached there, but if she does adopt 1 or 2, they're more likely to be girls. And honestly, this checks out for her. My sister's always talked about adoption more than she's ever talked about birthing children. In contrast, my mum has a good example of a benefic in the 4th house that carries over into the 5th house, given that she has an empty 5th house, so a starting potential of 0, but ended up having 3 children. And in her case, her having 3 children was probably a combination of her having a 4th house benefic and being with someone who had a 5th house amplifier. Because even though my dad has a 5th house north node, which is a heavy amplification energy, when you combine 2 charts together, what you're trying to do is split the difference. You're not trying to add them together. Because if you're trying to split the difference between someone who has an amplification energy in the 5th house, which can indicate anywhere between, let's say, 1 and 3 children, and someone with a starting potential of 0, ending up with 3 children, that's a lot if there's no other influencing factor. So in my parents' case, it was definitely my mum's 4th house Venus that came in to influence her having a lot more children than what her chart's initial potential of 0 was. This splitting the difference is where it gets complicated. You're never just going to add up how many placements the 2 of you have together. You're going to try and find what the middle ground is between the 2 charts. But for example, when you look at my brother's chart, who has 4 placements and 2 of them are benefics, he's definitely going to have a strong pull in his direction with whoever he ends up with. Like whether they have 0, 1, 2 placements, they're going to be very pulled in his direction because he has such strong benefic placements in his 5th house. And the same can be said if you have one partner with 1 placement, the other person with 4 placements, but 2 of those 4 placements are malefics. You're much more likely to get pulled in your partner's direction if 2 of your placements are malefic. The other interpretation for trying to split the difference between 1 and 4, if the other person has malefics, this can indicate having like 1 child really easily and then facing lots of complications to try and have more afterwards. Like you might still end up having more, but maybe there's some miscarriages or something else along the way. It really depends on the unique combination of how the 2 charts come together. For example, if you put mine and Carrie's charts together, we both have a starting potential of 3. However, because she has 2 malefics and I have 1 benefic and 1 like borderline malefic, this can indicate that we could have 2 kids together. And this is because the pull of her malefics are slightly stronger than the pull of my 1 benefic. In this case, what also makes me think it's more likely that this particular combination of charts would result in 2 children is that I have 2 placements in my 11th house, which is the house of adoption. And since we think it's unlikely that Carrie will carry her own children, given that she has 2 malefics in her 5th house, she's also a 5th house Aquarius, which can indicate an influence of technology when having children, and it also can indicate having a family in an unconventional way. Plus, I have 2 placements in my 11th house of adoption. This particular chart combination is very much giving that we would end up having 2 children. I would carry them both. However, because they would be carries biologically, I would have to adopt both of those children. What's more is this is also supported by the fact that all of my 5th house placements lean feminine and all of her 5th house placements lean masculine. Given that in terms of like traditional family setup, that would mean that I would be taking a more feminine role in the family and she would be taking a more masculine role in the family. So that's all the basics covered in terms of how to read children in your individual chart and then how to split the difference and combine 2 charts together to figure out the most likely outcome between you and someone else. Obviously, I offer readings to do this for you if you want that confirmed, or you maybe have a bit more of a complicated chart and you need some extra help, or if this video wasn't making a lot of sense to you because you're a bit newer to astrology and it was hard to keep up, like I can always do it for you. And so I have two kinds of readings that you can request via the link in my description box. The first is a child mini reading just for your chart. So if you want to know, according to your personal chart, what the potential for children is, I recommend getting that mini reading. If you're already partnered or you have a potential partner in mind, I do offer standard readings where you can get two charts compared together to get like each individual reading, but then also a bit of a split the difference to figure out what the most likely outcome would be when you put those two charts together. And so, yeah, both of those readings you can request via the link in the description box if you need any extra help or you just want something confirmed or you want me to do it for you, that's there for you. But hopefully you found this video helpful, and until we see each other again, thanks so much for supporting me on this channel. I would really appreciate it if you could like, comment and subscribe, especially leave me any questions in the comments. And yeah, that will really support me on this channel. Until we see each other again, ciao.